Welcome to Forbidden Texts. What you are about to see may shock you. It may surprise you, but will definitely challenge everything you thought you knew. Stick around until the end to discover the forbidden knowledge that they don't want you to have.
Have you ever felt like you're trapped in a never-ending void? Wondering if you're spiraling into a breakdown or awakening to something bigger? Maybe the darkness feels suffocating, like an endless night with no stars to guide you. Is it depression pulling you under? Or are you standing at the edge of a spiritual transformation? Welcome to Forbidden Text, where we uncover hidden knowledge and forbidden wisdom. In this video, we're diving deep into the shadows to explore the difference between two life-altering experiences, the dark night of the soul and depression. They might look the same on the surface, both marked by pain, confusion, and hopelessness, but their roots couldn't be more different. And knowing which one you're facing could be the key to breaking free. By the end of this journey, you'll have the clarity to recognize the hidden meaning behind your suffering and the tools to navigate it. But to get there, we need to explore the depths of these experiences, strip away the illusions, and uncover the truths that most people are too afraid to confront. Let's get into it. The term dark night of the soul sounds poetic, almost romantic, but let's not sugarcoat it. It's brutal. It's the kind of existential freefall that makes you question everything, your beliefs, your purpose, your very identity. It's not just sadness, it's the complete unraveling of who you thought you were. Originating from the writings of mystics like St. John of the Cross, the dark night of the soul isn't a mental illness. It's a spiritual disintegration, a forced reckoning with the ego's limitations. Imagine this: your old ways of understanding the world stop working. What once brought you comfort, your job, your relationships, even your faith, now feels hollow. It's like the universe has pulled the rug out from under you, and you're left stumbling in the dark, searching for meaning. This isn't a bad mood or a passing funk. It's a dismantling of everything you thought was solid. Here's the catch: the dark night doesn't come to destroy you, but to break you open. It's a transformation process, even if it feels like annihilation. The end game: growth, awakening, and stepping into a truer version of yourself. But the path to get there, it's messy, painful, and full of uncertainty. Contrast that with depression, which has its own unique grip. Depression doesn't feel like transformation. It feels like stagnation. It's the weight of apathy, the loss of energy, the persistent feeling that you're stuck in quicksand. It's clinical, rooted in biology, trauma, or external stressors. While depression locks you in place, the dark night forces you to move forward, even when you feel like you can't. But here's where things get tricky. These two experiences often overlap, making it hard to tell them apart. Both can strip you of hope, crush your sense of self, and leave you feeling like you're drowning. Yet one is a passage through darkness, while the other is a trap that keeps pulling you down. The first distinction lies in what triggers the experience. Depression often comes in the aftermath of trauma, loss, or overwhelming stress. It's your mind and body waving a white flag, signaling that something has gone horribly wrong and needs repair. Everything you've built your identity on, the job title, the social image, the belief systems, starts to collapse under the weight of its own falseness. It's not a sign of failure, but a sign that something deeper within you is fighting to come alive. Another key difference is how these experiences feel emotionally. Depression feels flat. It's like someone turned the volume of life all the way down until everything, joy, excitement, even sadness, blends into a gray, lifeless monotone. On the other hand, the dark night of the soul is raw. It's not numbness, it's anguish. It's a visceral feeling that something inside of you is dying, not because life is over, but because a rebirth is trying to happen. And then there's the ego. Depression attacks it, making you feel small, inadequate, and powerless. The dark night, however, dismantles it. Your sense of identity crumbles, not as a punishment, but as a way of stripping you down to your core. It's terrifying, yes, but it's also necessary for growth. The dark night of the soul isn't about keeping you in pain. It's about breaking the chains that keep you stuck in illusions. But here's the kicker. In both depression and the dark night of the soul, it can feel like there's no way out. The difference lies in where each path leads. Depression pulls you into a downward spiral, one where hope feels like a distant memory. The dark night, however, carries the faintest glimmer of something more. Even when it feels unbearable, there's a part of you, deep down, that knows this darkness is temporary. It's a tunnel, not a pit. You see how these distinctions can start to come into focus. We've barely scratched the surface, but you're already beginning to see the cracks in the illusion. Stick around, because as we explore the other key differences, you'll gain the clarity you need to navigate your own experience and uncover the hidden message behind the struggle. Keep going, because what's waiting on the other side is worth it. Let's keep peeling back the layers. One of the most striking differences between depression and the dark night of the soul lies in their timelines. Depression often feels like a stagnant swamp, a state that drags on, sometimes for months or years, with no clear beginning or end. It's cyclical, a relentless loop of emptiness and exhaustion that traps you in its grip. The dark night, however, moves in phases. It's not static, it's dynamic, like a storm that sweeps through and forces transformation. The dark night may last weeks, months, or even years, but it's rarely permanent. Why? Because it's not designed to be. It's a process. It has a purpose, even when it doesn't feel like it. The dark night has momentum. It shakes you, dismantles you, and eventually rebuilds you. Depression, on the other hand, tends to feel like being stuck in quicksand. The more you fight, the deeper you sink. It's not leading anywhere, it just is. Then there's the role of hope, or the lack of it. Depression erodes hope completely. It convinces you there's no point, no meaning, no way out. The future becomes a blank void, and even the smallest effort feels impossible. The dark night of the soul, though agonizing, carries a subtle whisper of something more. Deep down, you sense that this pain has a purpose. Even when it feels unbearable, there's a faint pull, a sense that if you can endure the darkness, something meaningful will emerge on the other side. And that brings us to the sixth key difference: insights gained. Depression doesn't typically offer clarity. It clouds your mind, leaving you disconnected from yourself and your surroundings. It's not about transformation, it's about survival. The dark night, however, is all about clarity, eventually. It forces you to confront your illusions, your false identities, and the parts of your life that no longer serve you. It's like being dragged through fire, only to emerge with a clearer, sharper understanding of who you really are. But here's the hard truth. Both experiences can feel like punishment while you're in them. Whether you're wrestling with depression or a dark night of the soul, it's easy to feel like you've been abandoned by the universe, left to fend for yourself in an unrelenting storm. That's why the final difference is the most important one: how healing emerges. Depression often requires external intervention, therapy, medication, support systems. It's about rebuilding what's been broken. The dark night, on the other hand, demands surrender. Healing doesn't come from fighting the process. It comes from allowing it to unfold. It's about trusting that the destruction of your old self is necessary for the birth of something greater. That surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means leaning in, facing the darkness head on, and letting it transform you. So now, you're probably wondering, how do you know which one you're experiencing? Depression or dark night? Stagnation or transformation? Here's the thing, it's not always obvious, and the lines can blur. But as we continue to explore their overlaps, the picture will become clearer. And by the end of this journey, you'll not only know the answer, but you'll also have the tools to face whatever lies ahead. Keep watching. You're closer than you think. Here's where things get complicated: the overlap. Depression and the dark night of the soul share so many symptoms that it's no wonder people often confuse the two. Both can bring crushing sadness, isolation, and the kind of emptiness that makes even the smallest tasks feel unbearable. Both can make you question your worth, your purpose, and even your desire to keep going. But here's the twist: context is everything. Imagine two people standing in the same pitch-black forest. One is lost, wandering aimlessly with no map, no compass, no hope of finding their way out. The other has been led into the forest intentionally. They don't know the path yet, but deep down, they understand that this journey has a purpose, that on the other side of the forest is something they need to find. The first person, depression. The second, the dark night of the soul. But in the middle of the darkness, the forest looks the same. Both feel like they're trapped in an endless void. Both are terrified. And that's why distinguishing between the two can feel impossible when you're in the thick of it. Depression doesn't care about growth or transformation. Its purpose is to weigh you down. The dark night of the soul, however, exists to break you open, to burn away the illusions, the masks, and the attachments that no longer serve you. It's painful, yes, but it's also intentional. This is why context matters so much. Depression is often triggered by a buildup of external pressures, trauma, stress, or chemical imbalances in the brain. It's the body's way of saying, I can't handle this anymore. The dark night, however, isn't about external triggers. It's about the internal collapse of your ego, the dismantling of who you think you are so that you can become who you're meant to be. It's a spiritual reset, not a biological one. And yet, here's the uncomfortable truth. The dark night can trigger depression, and depression can lead to a kind of spiritual crisis. They're not always separate, and sometimes you can find yourself in the grips of both at the same time. That's why it's so critical to understand what you're dealing with, to step back, look at the bigger picture, and ask the hard questions. Is this stagnation or transformation? Am I being called to let go of something? Or do I need to rebuild what's been broken? This is where self-awareness becomes your greatest weapon. The more you can understand the nature of your darkness, the better equipped you'll be to navigate it. And the key lies in the patterns, how long it's been going on, what's driving it, and where it seems to be leading you. Depression keeps you stuck. The dark night pushes you forward, even if it feels like it's dragging you by the teeth. As we move forward, we'll explore how to approach each experience, because whether you're dealing with depression, a dark night, or both, there's a path out of the darkness. And the clarity you're searching for, it's closer than you realize. Stay with me, because this is where things start to shift. The light you've been searching for might just be hiding in the darkness itself. So, how do you approach these experiences when you're caught in the grip of such overwhelming darkness? Whether you're dealing with depression, a dark night of the soul, or the tangled mess of both, the key lies in understanding what you need, because the way forward looks very different depending on what you're facing. If it's depression, the first step is recognizing that this isn't something you can just think your way out of. Depression often requires intervention, professional help, therapy, medication, and the kind of support that helps stabilize your mental and physical health. It's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. It's a survival strategy. Depression is a storm in your mind, and you need tools to weather it. Therapy can help you untangle the thought patterns that are keeping you stuck, while medication can provide relief from the crushing weight long enough for you to begin rebuilding. But the dark night of the soul demands a different approach. You can't fix it because it's not something broken. It's a process of transformation. The only way through is surrender. And surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means letting go of your resistance to the process. It's about accepting the collapse of your old self, even when it feels like you're losing everything. The dark night isn't here to punish you. It's here to guide you. Trust the process, even when it feels unbearable. For some, this means turning inward, journaling, meditating, or sitting in silence to face the uncomfortable truths that are surfacing. For others, it might mean leaning into spiritual practices, seeking guidance from mentors, or exploring philosophies that resonate with your experience. The dark night is deeply personal, and no two people's journeys will look the same. What matters is that you don't run from it. Let it do its work. Let it strip away what no longer serves you. But here's the thing, it's not always one or the other. Sometimes depression and the dark night overlap, creating a complex storm that feels impossible to navigate. In those moments, the answer isn't about choosing one approach over the other. It's about combining them. Seek professional help to address the mental and emotional strain, while also creating space for spiritual growth and reflection. Both can coexist, and both can lead you to healing. The most important thing you can do, no matter which experience you're facing, is to stay curious. Ask yourself, what is this darkness trying to show me? If it's depression, it might be revealing areas of your life that need repair, relationships, self-care, unresolved trauma. If it's a dark night, it's likely showing you what you need to release in order to evolve. Either way, the darkness has a message. Your job is to listen. And let's not forget the power of community. Whether you're reaching out to a therapist, a friend, or a spiritual teacher, you don't have to go through this alone. Isolation only feeds the shadows. Connection, on the other hand, can remind you that even in your darkest moments, you're not truly alone. There are people who've walked this path before you and come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more whole. This is your reminder. You have the power to face this. Whether it's healing through therapy or surrendering to transformation, there's a way forward. And as we move into the final part of this journey, you'll see how others have walked through the fire and found meaning in their struggle. Their stories might just be the light you've been searching for. Let's keep going. You're closer than you think. Let me tell you a story. Picture this, a man in his late 30s, successful on paper, with the house, the car, and the career that screamed, "I've made it." But one day, he wakes up, and it all feels meaningless. The joy is gone, replaced by a crushing emptiness he can't shake. For months, he spirals, questioning everything he's worked for, everything he's believed in. Therapy doesn't help. Medications barely touch the surface. He feels like he's losing his mind. Until one night, he breaks. Sitting in the dark, he starts asking questions he'd never dared to before. Who am I? Why does this hurt so much? What if everything I thought I wanted was a lie? And in that moment, something shifts. The pain doesn't disappear, it deepens. But now, it feels like it has meaning. He starts to see that his old life wasn't falling apart because he was broken. It was falling apart because it wasn't real. That night, his dark night of the soul began. And months later, when he emerged on the other side, he wasn't the same man. He wasn't living the same life. He was freer, lighter, and more aligned with his true self than he ever thought possible. Now compare that to another story. A young woman in her 20s, vibrant and full of energy, suddenly feels like she's drowning. Her mind is foggy, Her body is exhausted, and every day feels like a battle just to get out of bed. There's no spiritual epiphany, no deeper questioning, just the relentless grip of hopelessness. She's scared, ashamed, and convinced that she's failing at life. But unlike the man, her breakthrough comes when she reaches out for help. Therapy reveals long-buried wounds she never acknowledged. Medication lifts just enough of the weight for her to find her footing again. Slowly, she starts to heal, not by changing everything about her life, but by building the tools to face it. For her, the journey wasn't about transformation, it was about recovery. And that's just as powerful. These stories show us something crucial. Whether you're facing depression or a dark night of the soul, the path forward exists. It's not easy. It's not quick. But it's there. The man couldn't see his transformation until he surrendered to it. The woman couldn't find her healing until she asked for help. Both had to step into the darkness to find the light. And maybe that's the lesson here. The darkness isn't your enemy. It's a guide. Depression teaches you to rebuild. The dark night of the soul forces you to evolve. And sometimes, when life is at its hardest, you don't need to have all the answers. You just need the courage to take the next step. Wherever you are in your journey, whether you feel stuck, lost, or like you're being torn apart, know this: you're not alone. Others have walked this path before you, and others will walk it after you. And just like them, you can make it through. The darkness may feel endless, but it isn't. There is a light at the end of this tunnel, a brighter, freer version of yourself waiting to emerge. You have the strength to keep going, even if you can't feel it right now. Trust this: every step you take, no matter how small, is leading you closer to healing, to clarity, and to the life you were meant to live.